The third part of the course is about theory, about the basics of fine art. Motion design is a new kind of audiovisual art. So, in order to express his idea, designers should know these basics. Tools and skills of using the software are, of course, important, but basics about constructing the frame are much more important. Otherwise, what's the point of being able to use the tool if you can't make anything good? I'll tell you about color, form, composition, and text and how they all work together. The task of a motion designer is to transfer audiovisual information in some period of time and not overload the viewer. The message should be clear and simple without any extra explanations. Clear perception of the frame is built on clear organization of all its elements. The perception depends on many parameters, like elements in the frame, personal characteristics of the viewer, his past experiences, his state at the moment, what his attention is focused on. It's important to know that a man can perceive only a limited amount of information at once, so there should be no random details in a good frame. Most of the time, it's necessary to just make it simpler but keep clear at the same time. There are a lot of examples in motion design when the picture that contains just the essential elements creates the feel of power and clarity. Composition shows the viewer where to look. If something prevents the look from moving clearly around the frame, then the person unconsciously feels discomfort and you can lose his attention. Where do people look at any image? What attracts their attention? First, a movement. Second place, brightness. If we look at some character's face, then the most of our attention will be on his eyes. Also, any point of crossing lines and contrast. But in motion design, you have to remember that all visual tools only work together combined. At first, a designer has to constantly keep all that in mind, but later, when this information gets deeper, you'll do all this intuitively. Most of us get to know about motion design through the software and copying some cool effects to show friends, and later it gets to something bigger and becomes a profession for some. So let's talk about the color impact. The first visual tool I tell you about is the color and its nature. Isaac Newton worked with the theory of color back in the 17th century. He divided the white sunlight into a color spectrum using the prism and got 6 colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. The variety of colors based on that 6 is enormous, and it gives a huge choice for the designer. Every period of time has its own color preferences. Right now the trend is bright colors and contrasts. You can see it both in web and in motion designs. People just can't get enough of it for now, and for the next few years I believe the trend will continue. One of the reasons is the overwhelming amount of visual information around us, especially in the internet, and the need to reach to the audience from that big raging flow. And if you look up at the analytics from the stock platforms, then by 2019, Shutterstock predicts popularity of these 3 bright neon colors: purple, neon green, and bright pink. That analytics is worth of trust because they have the biggest base of purchased images in the world, and this analysis is made on the basis of consumer activity and demand. So what influences all these people? What specifications? Impact of the color on the viewer can be objective, subjective, and psychological. Objective impact of color is based on activity of light waves. Different colors are created with different waves, but these waves themselves don't have any color. Color arises in human perception through the eyes and the brain when the surface of the object absorbs light waves. For example, a red car looks red because it absorbs all other colors of the light beam and reflects only red. The color has objective properties and they create specific reactions. The cleaner and brighter the color, the stronger and more stable will be the reaction to it. Second, complex, less saturated, medium light colors create unstable and weak reactions. Third, most definitely the person reacts to such associations with colors as temperature, weight, and acoustic associations. Different people evaluate them almost equally. Yellow and green colors cause the most diversified associations because they are the most common colors in nature. The most ambiguous associations are tasting, tactile, smelling, and emotional because they are connected with individual emotions and senses. Reactions to these parameters can be different even among very close people. Subjective impact of color is connected with senses because eyesight pulls the hearing, tasting, and smelling with it. Color impressions can cause memories and linked with them emotions, images, and psychic states. That are color associations, they can be physical and emotional. Physical associations: weight, light, heavy, airy, pushing. For example, light blue can be called light because it is associated with the sky. Temperature: warm, cold, hot, icy. Then texture: soft, hard, smooth, spiky, sleepy. Acoustical: quiet, loud, hollow, vocal. For example, red color on Soviet posters from the Second World War, it felt loud, almost screaming. That is acoustical association. Dimensional: sticking out, deep, digressive, shallow. We can take Iwasowski and see how he shows the depth of the water using colors. And emotional associations: positive, like fun, pleasant, cheerful, lovely, lyrical. Negative, like sad, sluggish, boring, tragic, sentimental. And neutral, calm and indifferent. Where do subjective senses from color come from? There are a lot of features of a viewer: nationality and cultural traditions, age, sex, education, job, psychological differences, mood, life experience. There is a book, Picture Composition for Film and Television by Peter Ward. In the book, he tells about some tests that help to understand color preferences of the typical Western person. The most favorite is blue, the second is red, and then there are green, purple, orange, and yellow. Color impacts not only our psychic but physiology as well. Here's how. Red excites, makes feel warm, active, energetic, penetrating, activates the organism, makes blood pressure go up, makes breath faster. Orange tones up, effects like red but weaker. Yellow, physiologically optimal, the least tiring, stimulates eyesight and neural activity. Green, physiologically optimal too. The most usual for eyes because the most common. Makes blood pressure go down, reduces headache, increases productivity. Light blue calms down, reduces muscle stress and blood pressure, stabilizes the pulse and calms the breath. Blue calms down and then depresses, slows down psychological systems. And purple combines the effects of red and blue, depresses the nervous system. Cultural and historical perception of the color. Traditions of the world culture also affect the perception of the color. I mean common humanity symbols that are accepted by everyone. For example, white is the good, light, purity, water, milk or seed, a life-creating force. Red is blood, fire, warmth, sun. Mix of red and white symbolizes life. Black in human perception is darkness, death, the evil, the sin. Yellow changes during the Gothic age. It got a negative connotation. It became the color of betrayal, deception, corruption, and wicked intents. In Islam, green color, for example, is the color of happiness, but gray, on the other hand, is the color of failure. So, even if you study all the variants of possible combinations in color spectrum, it is still risky to use it without knowing its meaning. because this way you can get a completely opposite image from what you've expected, and what even more important, an unexpected reaction from the audience. Now let's talk about the characteristics of the color. Color has different characteristics, and if you know them, you can deal with all the variety of colors and create more harmonious combinations. These are the characteristics. Hue. It is the direction of the vector of color grade. Roughly speaking, it is the closeness to one of the spectral colors. All colors that have a color hue are called chromatic. So achromatic colors don't have a color hue. It is white, black, and gray. Luminosity, the amount of differentiation from white and black. Luminosity can be perceived different with different lighting. Brightness. It is measured in comparison with the gray color scale. It depends on brightness of the color, how fast we will notice this color among the others. Saturation. It is the intensity of the color, how different the chromatic color is from its achromatic equivalent, and also it depends on the density of the color. We can call it a saturated color rich or deep, and a less saturated, dim, and closer to gray. A completely unsaturated colors is a shade of gray. Color purity. It is the proportion of a pure spectral color in the general brightness of the color. The most pure are basic spectral colors. Perception of the color also depends on its surroundings, like the background color and color temperature of the light. For example, a person in a yellow jacket would look different with a background of green leaves and a blue sky. With gray weather, all colors look more dim. With good weather, the sunlight intensifies the color saturation of the object. So remember that. Color harmony. Color harmony seems like a subjective term. Who and how defines the color harmony, like which colors match and which don't? Sometimes you think that some color scheme is pretty great, but then some respectable person in design tells you that it's terrible. So how really subjective is it, and who is right? In this part of the lesson we go through color harmony in details. For that, we're going to use the color wheel. Evaluation of the color harmony or disharmony is usually based on the sense impressions. Sometimes it is completely subjective and other people can disagree. But there are also objective rules of harmony. Two colors are more harmonious if their mix gives a neutral gray. That's the basic of the color wheel, and it's easier to understand the rules of the color scheme using it. How to use the color wheel. Johannes Itten, a Swiss painter and a teacher, the author of The Art of Color, developed the color wheel. Using this wheel, one can create harmonious color combinations. This system helps to see all 12 colors and put all their possible variations. The color wheel is divided into 12 color sectors. In the middle, there is a triangle with 3 basic colors of the first level. It is blue, yellow, and red. Mixing them, you get all the variety of the color wheel. Secondary colors are purple, orange, and green. One gets these colors when mixes the primary colors in the equal proportion. After mixing the primary colors and secondary colors, we get 6 tertiary colors: yellow-orange, red-orange, red-purple, blue-purple, blue-green, and yellow-green. That's the concept of the color wheel that consists of 12 colors, and each has its constant place, and their order is the same as in the rainbow and natural spectrum. All the 12 colors in the circle have equal parts, so the opposite colors become complementary or contrast. Color combinations can be created using 2, 3, 4, or more colors. Let's look at them in detail. Combination of 2 colors. On the color wheel, 2 opposite colors are complementary and give the harmonious combination of 2 colors: red and green, blue and orange, yellow and purple. Combination of three colors. If we take three colors, then make an equal triangle on the color wheel, we get a harmonious combination. For example, yellow, red, and blue. It is the strongest combination, can be called general. Complementary colors of that triangle, purple, green, and orange, also give a harmonious combination. And two other triangles, yellow-orange, red-purple, blue-green, and red-orange, blue-purple, yellow-green. If we combine two complementary colors, for example blue and orange, and take two colors next to blue, blue-purple and blue-green, or on the opposite next to orange, yellow-orange and red-orange, then these combinations also would be harmonious, even though there is an isosceles triangle between them. If you add the triangle inside the color wheel, then you can move it and clearly see the harmonious combinations. Combination of four colors. If we take two pairs of complementary colors, which connection lines are perpendicular to each other, then we get a square. Now we have three different combinations of four colors: yellow, red, orange, purple, and blue. Yellow, orange, red, blue, purple, and green. And also orange, red, purple, blue, and yellow, green. Other four colors combination are easy to define using a rectangle which connects two pairs of complementary colors, like, for example, yellow-green, red-purple, yellow-orange, and blue-purple, or yellow, purple, orange, and blue. The third figure to get four colors combination is a trapeze. Two colors are next to each other and two opposite are on the left and on the right from their complementary colors. These combinations give simultaneous contrast, like a fluctuation of color. I'll talk about it in detail later, but anyway, they are harmonious. Combination of six colors. A six angles color scheme is possible to have in two ways. First way, draw a hexagon into the color wheel, and then you'll get harmonious combinations with three pairs of complementary colors. You can draw it in two hexagons and they would consist of yellow, purple, orange, blue, red, green, that's one hexagon, and yellow, orange, blue, purple, red, orange, red, purple, yellow, green, blue, green, that's another hexagon. You can also put them into the color sphere and get interesting color combinations changing the lightness of the color. Second way to get a six-angle scheme is to add black and white to four basic colors. We put a square into the belt of color sphere and get a four colors combination. It is based on two pairs of complementary colors. Then we connect every angle of the square with the white color at the top and with the black at the bottom. This way we get an octangle. We can turn any four colors combination which we make at the middle zone into a combination of six colors if we include white and black there. Instead of a square, you can also use a rectangle. Using a triangle which as the main shape combines with the white and black colors, you can get a combination of five colors. As an example, yellow, red, blue, black and white, or orange, purple, green, white and black. Nowadays, designers have thousands of ready-to-go color schemes. It is really useful. You can just go on Pinterest and find a bunch of color palettes, or Adobe Color has a lot of color solutions. And you might have a reasonable question, why spend time on the work with the color wheel? Well, first of all, this way you can learn coloristics and develop your taste. Secondly, you develop a very important skill of choosing colors combinations by yourself. You understand what and why you do, and you can better remember good combinations when you find them. You would be able to use your intuition to combine colors and make great combinations in seconds with no thinking about it. And third, it would be your personal creative experiments. Color creates harmony and contrast raises the interest. There are 7 types of contrasts in the color theory. Each of them has its own characteristics and an expressive power. They all increase abilities of the color, and sometimes different types of contrast can complement and intensify one another, so it is possible to combine them. Contrasts can be used not only in the frame but also during the whole project between different scenes and blocks. There are 7 types of contrasts: contrast of hue, light-dark contrast, cold-warm contrast, complementary contrast, simultaneous contrast, contrast of saturation, and contrast of extension. Let's talk about all these contrasts in details. So, contrast of hue is the most obvious and simple of all 7, and very powerful. It creates the effect of deepness because of the brightness of the objects. For example, brighter objects seem closer, darker seem further. Also, contrast of hue helps to move the viewer's attention, because we see bright parts first, especially if there is no movement in the frame. And of course, it affects the mood and emotional perception of the video. Yellow, red, and blue create the strongest contrast, create the effect of diversity, power, and determination. After that, the effect of the contrast decreases. Orange, green, and purple are much weaker with their contrast. In general, the further the color from another on the color wheel, the more contrast they are with each other. You can add white and black to the frame to increase the contrast. White makes adjusted colors weaker and makes them darker. Black is the opposite, makes them stronger and lighter. Actually, it is not recommended to use plain white or black colors. Usually it's changed at the post-production. It is better to train the contrast on simple forms, stripes or chess, to avoid confusion. You can have interesting results if you give the main role to one color and secondary to the another, to highlight the main. Let's talk about light-dark contrast. It is connected with the usage of gray. Neutral gray can weaken or strengthen a color. Similar lightness or darkness level makes color kinda related. Because of the same hue, they become linked and connected with each other. Achromatic gray is affected by a neighbor color so much that it starts to look complementary to it. When chromatic and achromatic colors of the same lightness verge with one another in the composition, they lose their neutrality. If you want to preserve the character of a chromatic color, then you need to lighten or darken chromatic colors. If you use gray because of the aesthetics, then it should be the same lightness as chromatic colors. Lightness or darkness of color can change because of the surrounding illumination and distort in twilight. Red, orange, and yellow look darker with faded light, and green and blue in the same conditions look lighter. In general, colors and their relations perfectly show itself only with bright daylight. Cold-warm contrast. Let's measure the temperature of color. Usually yellow, yellow-orange, orange, red, and yellow-green are cold-warm colors. Green, blue-green, blue, blue-purple, red-purple, and purple are cold. But it is not always like this, because the temperature of the color can be affected by its neighbors in the color wheel. Understanding the color temperature might help you to show the space or give the image extra depth and volume. Because the objects in a warm tone usually step forward and objects in a cold tone go back. The color temperature also gives it weight, heavier or lighter. Warm colors and objects look heavier than cold, and high saturated objects also look heavier than less saturated and smooth ones. Changing the temperature, you can control the image composition, put accents, and point the viewer's eye where you want it. For example, you can increase the intensity of a warm color if you surround it with cold tones. The cold-warm contrast can be called the loudest among the other contrasts. So if you create a composition based on a specific contrast, then make other contrasts lower or don't use them at all. Complementary contrast. In the color wheel, two complementary colors create a contradictory pair. They are completely opposite, but at the same time complement one another. Each color in the wheel has only one complementary color. So we have these pairs: yellow, purple, yellow, orange, and blue, purple, orange and blue, red, orange, and blue, green, red and green, red, purple, and yellow, green. Each of the pairs has its interesting features. For example, yellow-purple is not just the contrast of complementary colors, but also the light and dark contrast. Two pairs, red-orange and blue-green, and yellow-orange and blue-purple, are not only pairs of complementary colors, but also a strong cold-warm contrast. Red and its complementary green have the same lightness. Complementary colors in their proportional correlation create the static power in the image, like the power even without the movement. And each color stays the same in its intensity. Complementary colors are used not only with their main contrast qualities, but can also be used for tone adjustments of the image. The human eye structure is the reason why we have the simultaneous contrast. When our eye perceives some color, it kind of demands its complementary color, and if it's not there, then the eye creates it simultaneously. These colors don't exist objectively and you can't take a photo of them. How to use the simultaneous contrast? We put a small gray square on a large color surface. The color of the square would vibrate and distort. If the surface is red, then the square would seem red. On the purple background, yellow, and on the yellow, the square would seem purple-gray. Simultaneous contrast appears not only in combination of gray and some clear chromatic color, but also in combination of two clean colors, which are not fully complementary. Each of those colors would try to move another one closer to its complementary color, and in many cases both colors would distort to lose their objective character and kind of swing. Simultaneous contrast is not very useful. It is better to lower it as much as possible. For that, you add the shade of the main color. For example, if you add some yellow shade in a gray square on a yellow background, the simultaneous contrast would go away. So simultaneous contrast is the bug of our perception. Contrast of saturation. When we talk about the quality of the color, we mean its clarity and saturation. Contrast of saturation means the opposition between saturate, clear, colors and fadeness. It creates quiet and calm expression. How can you use contrast of saturation? Also for the depth of the image, because saturated colors go forward in compare with faded. And the depth changes again when we add light-dark contrast and warm and cold contrast to this contrast. There are 4 ways how colors can lose their clarity. First, clear color can be mixed with white. It makes it colder. Second, clear color can be mixed with black. It makes it gloomy. Black takes away the clarity of colors and kills them. Third, saturated color can be weakened if you add a mixture of black and white, basically gray, to it. It neutralizes colors and make them dim. Fourth way, clear colors can be changed if you add specific additional colors. For example, if you mix purple with little yellow, you get intermediate tones between light yellow and dark purple. In order to get great composition expression, you have to use only contrast of saturation without any other contrasts, and dim colors should be based on the color scheme of the saturated. I mean, clear red should contrast with dim red, and clear blue with dim blue. Don't use contrast where clear red is next to dim blue or clear green is with dim red. Otherwise, contrast of saturation would kill another contrast, like cold-warm contrast. Contrast of extension. Harmonious contrast of extension is also a great trick to make a vivid image and create intensive color expression. Also, it plays an important role in creating depth. When there is a small yellow spot on a large red surface, then red color becomes the background and yellow goes up front. If we increase the size of yellow and decrease the size of red, then at some point yellow would become more important than red. Yellow can become the background and move red up front. In some sense, it is the contrast of proportions. Contrast of extension depends on the size, on the proportions of the colors to each other and the background, and on the balance of all these characteristics. It is the opposition between a lot and a little, big and small, and at the same time of the lightness of colors. Intensity of this contrast depends on two things. First is lightness of the color, second is size. To find out the lightness of colors, we need to compare them on a neutral gray background. This way we'll make sure that the intensity and lightness of the color are different for different colors. A German philosopher and one of the first theoretics of color, Goethe, marked the degree of lightness of general colors in points, where 12 is the lightest color. So yellow is 9, orange is 8, red is 6, purple is 3, blue is 4, and green is 6. Based on the points, we get the following pairs correlations of lightness. You see some math on the screen. Yellow is 3 times lighter than purple, so it should take only 1/3 of the space in comparison with its complementary purple. And that space would be enough for yellow. This is why you can keep them harmonious in the image, and yellow doesn't overcome his friend, purple. Remember about simultaneous contrast, when the small gray square inside the big light square vibrates and attracts the attention. We have the same effect with color in contrast of extension. Just a little drop in the middle of a large color surface screams and creates a strong impression. That was an example of contrast of yellow with dark purple. If you need to highlight the yellow spot among the other light tones, you have to make it bigger. When it is among the dark tones and the small amount is enough because its lightness is increased with its surroundings. How to start to get harmonious contrast of extension? First, you have to choose the character of the colors and its intensity, and based on that create forms and sizes of color spots. I mean first colors, then the image, and not the opposite. Okay, I also want to tell you about gradients. I love them. It is a very old thing, but recently becomes super popular. I think the reason for this, Apple. 10th of June 2013, an update of Apple operating systems was released. Old 3D style icons were changed for flat bright gradients. And I remember how the world separated into two camps. All design groups were discussing it. Many were saying that Jonathan Ive lost his mind. What kind of solution is that? Why such a primitive flat design? And those colors? But seems like he created the trend for the next 10 years. Look at the modern interface, design, and graphic design, trends of 2017, 18, 19. All of them are filled with bright, bold gradients. So, what is gradient? Gradient is the transition from one color into another. Most harmonious and pleasant for the eyes gradients are created with close to each other colors. Close tone, saturation, and temperature. For example, green and yellow, pink and orange, or red, blue with light blue, and so on. Gradients can consist of two colors. These are very simple gradients. Also 3 colors, 4 colors, and multiple colors gradients. Radial is when the border between two colors goes in circle, or linear when the border goes in a straight line. This is the most common. Actually, the border can go in curve or spiral or any way you want. Modern instruments and software allows a lot of variations for designer. Go on Pinterest and type color gradient and you'll see a lot of great examples. Okay, that's all I wanted to tell you about the color and its limitless abilities. The last thing I would like to add is that you shouldn't follow the rules 100% because you control them, not they control you. When you know the rules, you can use your opinion, intuition, your life experience, and personality. And there is some quote from one of the greatest researcher of color, Leonardo da Vinci. If you only follow the rules in the process of art, you'd never achieve anything.